7 folding knives. Every one of them built to do the same job as the knife in the middle of the table. And the knife in the middle is a Buck Model 110. Some were thinner, one was heavier, and arguably tougher. One was built by men who had worked inside the Buck factory before they walked out and started their own company. Another came out of a small mountain town in Japan, and today it sits in a museum there. And yet, 6 decades later, the knife still standing in the center of that table is the Buck. Now, I want to be careful here. Some of these 7 were direct copies, some were deliberate competitors, and some were simply different answers to a question Buck had asked first. Here is what I want you to hang on to. The Buck 110 did not necessarily beat these knives at cutting. It beat them at becoming an identity. And by the end of this, you will know how to look at the old folding hunter in your drawer, or your father's tackle box, and tell in about 10 minutes what it actually is. Do not clean it first. I will explain why. Before we talk about the challengers, we have to be honest about what Buck actually did. Buck did not invent the lockback. Locking folders are old. Spyderco's published history of the backlock treats mid-19th century backlocks as ordinary commercial products, and collector references citing Remington factory literature list large lockback folding hunters on a price sheet from 1930. So the lock was not new. What was new was that almost nobody wanted to pay extra for it. For most of a century before Buck, as the dealer and writer A.G. Russell put it, locking folders were a minor part of the business, because ordinary buyers thought it foolish to pay extra for a mechanism they did not believe they needed. So Buck did not invent the lock. Buck convinced ordinary American hunters that a folding knife could be trusted with work that had always belonged to a fixed blade. Buck's own company history puts the folding hunter in the printed catalog in 1965 at $16, then records company sales rising 63% the following year, and 60% again the year after that. And here is the sentence in that same history this whole video grew out of. Buck writes that their success was not lost on their competitors, and that several of them quickly introduced their own knockoff versions of the folding hunter. One of them, according to Buck, even used a photograph of the Buck knife in its own advertising. So the reaction was real. It is documented by the company that got copied. But the thing Buck really built was not the lock. It was a picture. Clip point blade, brass bolsters, dark wood, a heavy frame, a lockback spine, and a black leather belt sheath with one snap. That combination became a visual formula, and within 15 years, almost every serious American cutlery company was selling a version of that same picture. So, I am not grading these 7 on which one cuts better. I am asking 4 things. What did it do better than the Buck? Could a normal person actually buy it? Could you recognize it from 10 feet away? And did the company survive long enough for a second generation to inherit one? Watch how often that last question is the one that mattered. We start in Germany. Puma, of Solingen, traces its trademark registration to 1769, and a great many American hunters in the 70s carried a Puma folder they simply called a Game Warden. Here is the part almost nobody gets right. Collector references working from Puma production records describe model number 970 appearing around 1968 under a completely different name. It was called the Plainsman. Then, for what appears to have been a single quarter in 1970, the same knife was renamed the Planter, and only in the 3rd quarter of that year did it become the Game Warden. Same model number the whole way through, 3 different names. So if you are holding a Puma 970 and the etch says Plainsman, you are not holding an oddity. You are holding the earliest version. It was thinner than the Buck. It carried better in a pocket, and there is a fair argument that it was the more refined knife. But refinement was never Buck's fight. Puma was an import, sold through a narrower dealer network at a higher price, into a market that was learning to say the words Buck knife. And now the part you can use tonight. In the 4th quarter of 1964, Puma began stamping a production control number on its knives. On a lockback folder, you will find it on the spring lock, the piece you press to close the blade. Puma's American distributor still runs a public lookup tool for that number. And if a genuine Puma folder carries no control number at all, the collector references treat it as pre-1964. So before you touch that knife with anything, find the number on the spring and photograph it. If Puma's answer was refinement from across the Atlantic, the next came from about 1,000 miles up the coast from Buck's own factory. Gerber Legendary Blades of Portland, Oregon, the Folding Sportsman II. And this one carries the best single identification clue in the whole video. Long-running dealer and collector listings agree that the first Folding Sportsman IIs were not made in Oregon at all. They were made in Solingen, Germany, for roughly the first year, before the tooling moved to Portland, which means a Folding Sportsman II marked Solingen, Germany is a first-year knife, and one marked Portland is everything after. I will flag something honestly. Sources disagree on the start year. Some say 1972. Others say Portland production began the year after. I have not found a Gerber factory document that settles it, so I am not going to pretend I have one. What Gerber designed is not in dispute. Slimmer than the Buck. Lighter in the hand. Built on Gerber's own patented blade grind. Later examples appeared in a high-speed tool steel Gerber marketed as V-steel, which is genuinely uncommon on a folding hunter. And here is the paradox. Gerber solved the most obvious complaint about the Buck 110, weight. But the weight of the Buck was part of what convinced the man at the hardware counter that the knife was serious. Sometimes you fix the flaw and accidentally remove the reason people wanted the thing. If Gerber refined the formula, the next company went in exactly the opposite direction. And these men had inside knowledge. Rigid knives. Collector references and dealer histories consistently describe Rigid as founded in the early 1970s in Santee, California, by men who had been working at Buck. The names that recur are Bill Duff, Don Collum, and Dean Parks. Buck's own historian has been cited confirming that former Buck employees started it. So ask the obvious question. What happens when men who built the Buck 110 from the inside decide it is not heavy-duty enough? You get the R9 Apache. Collectors have called it, more than once, a Buck 110 on steroids. Solid brass frame, wood or micarta inlays, a blade noticeably thicker than Buck's, weight in the range of half a pound and beyond. These were not cheap copies. They were overbuilt on purpose. So why is the Buck still in every hardware store, while Rigid is a name most people have never heard? Because craftsmanship is not the same thing as scale. Buck had to ship thousands of knives into thousands of stores, with a warranty department behind them, year after year. Rigid could build something an enthusiast would love. That is a different business. And the Rigid record is messy. Accounts differ on when the company ended and on where the shop moved. The name was later used by importers on knives made overseas, which is exactly why the tang marking matters. And this is the point of the entire video. If you find an old folding hunter with a name you do not recognize, that is not evidence it is worthless. Sometimes it only means you are the first person in the room who has not identified it yet. Which is why I put together a free guide, the Vintage Folding Hunter Identification and Collector Checklist. Large print, printable, where to find the tang stamp, how to photograph it, the dating systems for every company in this video, and the 7 things that quietly take value off a knife before you have even identified it. Link in the description. It costs nothing. Now, if one American company came close to building a second Buck 110, it was Schrade, the LB7, known to a great many people as the Bear Paw, and Schrade left the best paper trail here. Research compiled from Schrade's own production records puts the start of LB7 manufacturing in late 1977, with roughly 17,000 shipped by year's end. The knife was advertised in American Rifleman the following July. The first catalog listing came in 1979. And then the numbers get remarkable. That same research records more than 300,000 made in 1978, more than 450,000 the year after, and more than 1 million in total by the end of 1980. over 1 million knives in about 3 years. That is not a niche competitor. That is a company that believed it could take the category. And here is the collector payoff, because Schrade serial numbered them. Collector research maps those serial ranges to years. The earliest examples carry 4-digit serials, later ones move to letter prefixes. So on an LB7, the serial number is not decoration, it is a date. There is a second marking that matters more, the letters USA, because Imperial Schrade did not survive. On the 30th of July, 2004, in Ellenville, New York, the company's employees were handed a 1-page letter. Contemporary reporting put the number let go that day at least 260 people. Many had been there 20 and 30 years. The company had been making cutlery for a full century. The name was bought at auction that October by Taylor Brands of Tennessee, and production moved overseas. So a Schrade LB7 marked USA and a Schrade-branded knife made afterward are not the same object. And this is what I did not expect to find when I started pulling these records. Collector history is very often company history wearing a knife costume, which brings us to a company that had something Buck did not. Case. W.R. Case & Sons already owned something almost impossible to build, a collector culture. So in about 1978, Case brought out a heavy lockback folding hunter called the Hammerhead, pattern 59, roughly 5 inches closed, stamped P159 LSSP on the wood-handled version, with a hammerhead shark etched on the blade. Case was arguably the stronger consumer brand. So why did Hammerhead never become what the 110 became? Because being a stronger brand does not let you take another brand's category. Case had spent generations teaching Americans that case meant a stockman, a trapper, bone handles, and a knife you carried in your pocket. Buck already owned the other thing. The heavy folder you wore on your belt. Case was not losing on quality. Case was competing against a picture already fixed in the customer's head. And this is the easiest win in the video, because Case documents its own dating publicly. Case's official knowledge base states that beginning in 1970, 10 dots were added beneath the USA on the tang, and 1 dot was removed each year. 9 dots is 1971. 5 dots is 1975. 1 dot is 1979. There is one trap, and Case names it themselves. The same dot system ran again in the 80s. Those stamps use a lightning bolt-shaped S in both Case and USA, and the dots sit above the USA rather than below it. So on a hammerhead, you can open the blade, count the dots, check the shape of that S, and know the year. Now to Colorado. Because there is one competitor most people at an estate sale walk straight past. Western. Western States Cutlery was founded in Boulder, Colorado, in 1911 by H.N. Platts, who came from a cutlery family and had sold his interest in Case before heading west. That is not a small detail. Case and Western share a family root. Western's answer to the 110 was the Westlock line. The full-size models carry the numbers 541 and 542. 541 used wood. 542 used an imitation stag material. And Western made one visual choice that separates them from a Buck instantly. Nickel-silver bolsters, not brass. Look at the metal at the ends of the handle. If it is a bright, cool, silvery gray instead of a warm yellow, you are very likely not looking at a Buck at all. Western's dating is easy too. Collector references list a single-letter date code stamped alongside the model number starting in the late 70s, A for 1977, B for 1978, and onward through the alphabet. So, a Western 542, stamped with an F, is a 1982 knife. So why did Western disappear? Not because the knives failed. Acme United, which owns the Western trademark today, publishes the chain of events on its own corporate site. Harvey Platts ran the company until 1984, when Western was sold to a division of the Coleman Corporation, ending more than 100 years of Platts' family involvement in American cutlery. Coleman held it until about 1990. An investor group in Wyoming bought the factory and trademarks, then the brands, Machinery and tooling went to Camillus Cutlery. Sources disagree on whether that happened in 1991 or 92, and I am not going to pick one to make the sentence cleaner. Camillus closed in February of 2007, so Western did not lose to Buck on the shelf. Western lost to a chain of ownership changes that ended in somebody else's bankruptcy, which leaves one more, and it is the odd one out. Kershaw. Pete Kershaw had been a marketing man at Gerber before he and his wife Judy started their own company and shipped their first knife in 1974. And here is the detail that ties this whole video together. According to research published by a collector who specializes in the maker's work, Pete Kershaw sent an American-made Gerber fixed blade to a Japanese knife maker named Ichiro Hattori in the city of Seki and asked him to design a line around it. The folder that came out of that was the 1050 folding field, so follow that chain. A Gerber salesman sends a Gerber knife to a Japanese master to design a competitor in a category Buck created. And the 1050 did not try to look like a Buck. Black phenolic handles with finger grooves, a drop point blade rather than a clip point, jimping filed into the spine. It was heavy. It was beautifully finished. And the men who owned one tend to describe it the way people describe a good rifle. Now the identification payoff, and it is one of the cleanest in the hobby. The Ricasso marking changes by production era. The earliest run reads Kershaw, Oregon, USA on one side, and 1050 Japan on the other. The next era adds the words by KAI Japan. The era after that replaces Oregon with the words folding field. And the last era drops KAI entirely. 4 production eras, readable in about 10 seconds with a magnifier and good light. And one more thing I did not expect. A Kershaw 1050 is on display in the Seki Sword Tradition Museum in Gifu Prefecture, Japan. An American brand's hunting folder, designed by a Japanese master in a Japanese museum of blade history. So why did it vanish? Because the market moved. Pocket clips arrived, one-hand opening arrived, and a market that wanted a light folder in a pocket stopped buying half-pound folders on a belt. Kershaw is very much still in business. The 1050 is not. So, 7 knives, some thinner, some heavier, some arguably better made. Why is it the Buck that your father recognized and your son will recognize? First, Buck did not sell a knife. Buck owned a silhouette. Cover the tang-stamp on a brass and wood lockback, show it to almost any American over 50, and listen to what they call it. Second, good enough, available and trusted beats best. The best-selling tool in any category is almost never the tool that wins every test. Third, distribution beats metallurgy. A hunter cannot buy the better knife if the store in his county does not stock it. Fourth, and I think this is the real one, continuity creates inheritance. Schrade's American factory closed. Western passed through 3 owners and ended inside a bankruptcy. Rigid was small, and then it was gone. Kershaw moved on. Buck kept building the 110. Buck's material for the model's 60th anniversary describes it as among the best-selling knives in the world, with more than 15 million sold since the 1960s. A father buys it. A son recognizes it. A grandson wants it. You cannot measure that on a hardness chart. Fifth, Buck won the language. When an ordinary American calls any brass and wood lockback a Buck knife, even when the tang says Schrade, or Western, or Puma, the brand has escaped the product. So what should you look for? I am deliberately not giving you dollar figures. Condition, variation, markings, sheath and box move these knives so much that any single number I said out loud would mislead somebody watching. What I will give you is where to look. The easy one, a Schrade LB7 marked USA. There are a great many of them, and that is the point. Serial number, condition, and the original sheath separate one from another. The sleeper, Western 541 and 542. Plenty of people recognize a Buck. Far fewer recognize a Western. An estate sale table will often price it as, quote, an old folding knife. The one to stop and think about, a rigid R9 Apache. That is the name most likely to be underestimated by someone who has never heard of the company. And the rabbit hole. Early Gerber Folding Sportsman IIs. Early Kershaw 1050s. Early case hammerheads. In that group, variation is the whole game. So here is what I would do tonight, with the knife in your drawer. Do not polish it. Do not sharpen it. Do not put a wire wheel anywhere near it. Polishing softens a tang-stamp, and the tang-stamp is the identification. Photograph both sides of the closed knife, then open the blade and photograph the tang, straight on, with light coming across it from the side, rather than straight at it. Photograph any model or pattern number. Look at the bolster metal, warm yellow, or cool silver. Check the sheath, because sheaths get stamped too, and compare the blade profile against a photograph of an unused example. Decades of sharpening narrows a blade, and that is one of the largest condition factors there is. Then, when you go looking for value, search completed and sold results. Not what somebody is asking. Anybody can ask anything. And only then decide whether to clean it, carry it, keep it, or sell it. The whole process is in the free guide, with a fill-in record sheet you can keep with the knife. I will leave you with this. Most of these 7 knives did not disappear because the Buck 110 was obviously better. Some were thinner, some were more refined, some were built heavier on purpose, by men who had helped build the Buck itself. One sold over 1 million units in about 3 years. But Buck had something harder to copy than brass bolsters and a lockback spine. 60 years of uninterrupted identity. Now, if you have one of these on your bench, and I have gotten something wrong, I want to hear it. And I want to see the documentation, a catalog page, factory literature, a photograph of the tang. I would rather be corrected in public than repeat something that is not true. Go look at the knife. Do not clean it first.